When the newly elected Pope Leo XIV accepted an invitation to speak at a prestigious Italian university, his only intention was to share a message of hope with the next generation. But the event took a dramatic turn when he was unexpectedly challenged on stage by Professor Valerio Rossi, the university's most infamous atheist, celebrated for his public takedowns of religious leaders. What the arrogant professor didn't realize, however, was that he wasn't just challenging a man of God. He was challenging a man with a razor-sharp mind, whose brilliant response would be responsible for one of the most stunning intellectual reversals ever witnessed in a public forum. And how it ended, well, that's the moment nobody saw coming. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's mid-June 2025, just over a month since Cardinal Robert Prevost became Pope Leo XIV, the first American pope in history. The Catholic world is still celebrating this humble Augustinian who had spent years as a missionary in Peru before being called to serve at the Vatican. But at one of Italy's most prestigious universities, a very different kind of excitement is brewing. The university has just announced something unprecedented, a symposium called Faith and Science, a dialogue for the future. The keynote speaker, Pope Leo XIV himself. But here's where it gets interesting. Sharing the stage with him is Professor Valerio Rossi, the university's most notorious atheist, a brilliant physicist known throughout Europe for his razor-sharp intellect and his absolute hatred of organized religion. Word spreads like wildfire across campus. Students whisper in the hallways. Faculty members exchange knowing glances. Everyone knows Rossi's reputation. He's made a career out of intellectually destroying religious figures in public debates. His colleagues call him the priest destroyer behind closed doors. This isn't just going to be a dialogue about faith and science. This is going to be a public execution. The invitation reaches the Vatican, and immediately alarm bells start ringing. Papal advisors huddle in emergency meetings. They know exactly what this is, a carefully orchestrated trap designed to humiliate the new pope on international television. But what Professor Rossi doesn't realize is that he's about to face an opponent unlike any he's encountered before. Cardinals rush into Pope Leo XIV's study with panicked faces. "Your Holiness, this is a setup," one advisor says breathlessly. Professor Rossi destroys religious figures for sport. He calls faith intellectual cowardice and boasts about freeing humanity from the God delusion. "It's a trap, Holy Father." The room falls silent. The advisors expect him to decline immediately. But Pope Leo XIV looks up with unshakable calm. "Brothers, I've debated communist leaders in Peru, atheist professors in Chicago, skeptical journalists worldwide. Professor Rossi isn't the first angry man who believes destroying faith will save humanity." He stands. This is about reaching hundreds of young minds genuinely searching for truth. "I accept." 300 miles north, Professor Rossi grins at his computer screen, reading the Vatican's response. He pulls out a thick folder marked Project Checkmate, months of research designed to destroy Catholic doctrine on live television. "Perfect," he tells his assistant. "I've waited my entire career for this moment. Time to expose their precious pope as just another fraud peddling fairy tales." He opens the folder, revealing pages of carefully crafted attacks, scientific arguments, and philosophical traps. Every question designed to humiliate, every point calculated to destroy. But Professor Rossi has no idea what he's actually signed up for. The auditorium is packed to bursting, students in aisles, professors against walls, news cameras everywhere. What started as an academic symposium has become the intellectual showdown of the year. Professor Rossi enters like a rock star, tall, commanding, flashing that $1,000,000 smile as his students cheer. He takes the podium like he owns it. Then Pope Leo XIV walks in. The contrast is stunning. Where Rossi radiates arrogance, the Pope moves with quiet dignity. Simple white robes, respectful nod to the crowd. The room falls dead silent. Even Rossi's biggest fans hold their breath. Professor Rossi grabs the microphone. Today we discuss the future. He begins, voice dripping charm. But first, we must establish empirical reality, observable facts before we explore. He pauses, smirking. The more metaphorical interpretations of existence. The word metaphorical cuts like a blade. 10 seconds in, and he's already dismissed the Pope's entire worldview as fantasy. Morality is fascinating from an evolutionary perspective, Rossi continues, building momentum. Ancient codes like forgiveness and sacrifice helped primitive tribes survive, but they're outdated survival software. Humanity is finally outgrowing this need. Students shift uncomfortably. Faculty members stare at the Pope, waiting for his reaction. But Leo XIV sits perfectly still, completely calm, as Rossi systematically destroys everything Christians believe. In front of 500 witnesses and rolling cameras, the attack has begun, and the Pope hasn't said a word. Rossi senses victory and presses harder. Let's be honest, he says, gesturing dismissively toward the Pope. Ancient texts written by Bronze Age shepherds who thought the earth was flat, and were supposed to base modern lives on these stories. Nervous laughter ripples through the crowd. Rossi feeds off it. Science reveals a universe far more magnificent than any mythology. Billions of galaxies operating by mathematical laws that need no divine intervention. We have gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces. These are the real miracles. He clicks to a stunning, deep space image. This is reality. Beautiful, vast, completely indifferent to human hopes and fears. No cosmic judge, no eternal punishment, just matter and energy dancing across space and time. Even Catholic students nod along. The presentation is brilliant. Then Rossi moves in for the kill. And yet, his voice drips with superiority. Some still insist there's a ghost in this magnificent machine. A supernatural puppeteer demanding worship, threatening punishment for those who dare think freely. He turns directly to Pope Leo. With all due respect, isn't it time humanity graduated from fairy tales? Shouldn't we teach children to face reality with courage instead of hiding behind comforting myths? Deadly silence. Every eye turns to the Pope. Cameras zoom in. This is the moment Rossi planned, the public destruction of the Church's highest authority. Leo XIV sits motionless for what feels like forever. Then slowly he leans toward his microphone. The Pope's voice cuts through the silence, calm and clear. A fascinating presentation, Professor. But you seem to confuse the author of the book with one of his characters. The words hit like a lightning bolt. Rossi's confident smile freezes on his face. Students look at each other, trying to process what they just heard. In one simple sentence, the Pope has turned the entire framework upside down, suggesting that Rossi, for all his brilliance, is missing the most fundamental point of all. The professor's face flushes red. His carefully planned presentation, his months of preparation, his moment of intellectual triumph, all undone by a single, devastating observation that he never saw coming. "Excuse me?" Rossi stammers, his composure cracking for the first time. He blinks twice, clearly caught off guard by the philosophical depth of the response. But Pope Leo XIV doesn't elaborate. He simply sits back, that same peaceful expression on his face, as if he's just made a casual comment about the weather. The moderator tries to regain control. "Perhaps we could move to a more structured debate format." "No," Rossi interrupts, his voice sharp with wounded pride but also genuine curiosity. "I want to address that statement directly." He turns to face the Pope, his academic arrogance now mixed with personal offense and something else, a flicker of unexpected respect. "Your Holiness seems to think there's some grand design, some cosmic purpose behind the universe, but where's the evidence? Where's the proof?" The Pope nods thoughtfully. "You're asking the right question, Professor, but perhaps we should examine what we're really debating here." "Which is what, exactly?" Rossi snaps, though his tone has shifted slightly. "Whether the values you so casually dismissed, love, sacrifice, forgiveness, hope, are merely evolutionary accidents, or whether they point to something far more profound than your telescopes can measure. The room erupts in murmurs. Students lean forward. This isn't going the way anyone expected. Rossi pauses for just a moment longer than usual, studying the Pope's face. Then his ego kicks back in. Fine, he says, his voice cold with determination. Let's have this debate right now. Let's see which worldview can actually stand up to scrutiny. Pope Leo XIV looks directly into Rossi's eyes and nods once. I accept. The greatest intellectual showdown in years is about to begin, and nobody in that auditorium has any idea what they're about to witness. Rossi steps away from his podium, his scientific presentation forgotten. This has become personal. Let's be frank, Your Holiness. The modern world was built on ambition, disruption, relentless progress. Your values of turning the other cheek and loving your enemies, with all due respect, are handbrakes on human advancement. Today's youth want to soar, not chain themselves to 2,000-year-old dogma. The professor gestures to the packed auditorium. Look around you. These brilliant minds are building tomorrow through technology, innovation, competition. What does your religion offer them? Submission, humility, guilt over their natural ambitions? Several students nod. Rossi feels momentum shifting back. Science gave us medicines, computers, space travel. What has faith given us besides centuries of war, oppression, and intellectual stagnation? Isn't it time we move beyond these primitive control mechanisms? Pope Leo XIV listens patiently, never interrupting. When Rossi finishes, the Pope stands slowly. Professor, you see Christian values as chains. I see them as the foundation of a house. His voice carries clearly through the silent auditorium. Not the most visible part, but what keeps everything from collapsing when the storms come. He takes a step forward. Ambition without purpose becomes greed. Innovation without morality becomes destruction. Competition without compassion becomes cruelty. You speak of progress, but toward what end? A world where only the strongest survive? Where efficiency matters more than mercy? The Pope's gaze sweeps across the students. You mentioned Monsignor Georges Lemaitre, father of the Big Bang Theory, a man of profound faith. Perhaps his humility before a creator allowed him to see truth that others, perhaps more prideful, could not. Rossi's eyebrows raised slightly. He hadn't mentioned Lemaitre at all. How did the Pope know to bring up this specific example? His jaw tightens as he realizes the Pope is using his own field against him with surgical precision. This isn't about physics, Professor. It's about what physics will never measure. The weight of conscience, the value of forgiveness, the reason for hope when everything seems lost. Scattered applause breaks out. Rossi realizes his grip on the room is slipping and his desperation is beginning to show. Rossi's face flushes red. He can feel his intellectual dominance cracking, and his massive ego won't allow it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. He explodes, his polished professor mask finally slipping. Pretty metaphors instead of hard science. Foundation analogies and humble priests. It's all just fairy tale nonsense. He starts pacing like a caged animal, movements sharp and desperate. You want Lemaitre? Fine. Brilliant physicist who happened to believe in God. His science worked despite his delusions, not because of them. His voice grows louder, more frantic. Your Holiness talks about conscience and forgiveness like they're sacred truths. They're evolutionary accidents. Tribal survival code that's completely useless in our data-driven world. He whirls toward the audience, sensing he's losing them. Look at these students. They're building artificial intelligence, engineering genes, computing quantum realities. What do Bronze Age shepherds know about neural networks or Mars exploration? A few students still nod, but uncertainty creeps across faces. Rossi gets more aggressive, almost shouting now. Your ancient morality is dead weight. This generation needs practical ethics based on results, not bedtime stories about sky judges and eternal punishment. But something shifts in the room. Students start glancing between the ranting professor and the Pope, who sits perfectly still, completely calm despite the increasingly vicious personal attacks. The contrast is striking. One man losing control, the other radiating unshakable peace. Pope Leo XIV waits until Rossi's echo fades to silence. Then he speaks, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. Professor, you just answered your own question. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum computing, incredible tools. But tools in whose hands? The simple question cuts through Rossi's bluster like a sword. And for the first time all night, the professor has no answer. Rossi realizes he's walked directly into a trap, but his ego won't let him back down. In the hands of rational, educated people who understand science, people who make decisions based on evidence, not superstition. And when those rational people disagree, the Pope asks quietly, when one scientist says genetic engineering should enhance human intelligence, and another says it should eliminate genetic diseases, and a third says it should create perfect soldiers, who decides? What's your standard for measurable outcomes when you're literally redesigning humanity? Rossi opens his mouth, then closes it. For the first time all evening, he doesn't have an immediate answer. The Pope's questions cut straight to the heart of debates raging in scientific journals worldwide. Debates Rossi himself has participated in. Pope Leo XIV continues, his voice gentle but relentless. You see, Professor, every generation thinks it's outgrown the need for timeless wisdom. Every empire believes it's finally evolved beyond ancient constraints. But the questions that kept shepherds awake under the stars thousands of years ago are the same ones keeping your students awake right now. Who am I? Why am I here? What do I owe to others? What happens when I die? The Pope's gaze moves across the room, connecting with individual faces. Your artificial intelligence can process data, but can it tell a mother whether she should forgive the drunk driver who took her child? Your quantum computers can model reality, but can they explain why a soldier throws himself on a grenade to save his friends? Your genetic engineering can modify DNA, but can it answer whether we should? Students throughout the auditorium are nodding now. Even some of Rossi's colleagues look thoughtful. Rossi stares at the Pope for a long moment, clearly processing how effortlessly this man has dismantled arguments he's spent years crafting. Sensing he's losing them, Rossi plays his final card. That's all poetry. The youth of today don't have time for philosophical debates. Your values are out of fashion. They want practical solutions, not abstract moral lectures. The words hang in the air, and for a moment, Pope Leo XIV says nothing. Then, with devastating calm, he delivers the blow that will end this debate once and for all. Professor, fashion is what changes every season to convince us to buy something new. The truth doesn't change, Pope Leo XIV continues, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent auditorium. The desire of the human heart for love, for justice, for meaning that death cannot destroy. That isn't fashion. That's the human condition. He takes a step closer to Rossi, who stands frozen, finally realizing he's been completely outmaneuvered. It's as present today in the young person searching for purpose while scrolling through their smartphone as it was in the shepherd, looking at the stars millennia ago, asking, who made me? You offer them a universe that's vast and fascinating, but ultimately empty. Faith offers them a home. The auditorium erupts. Students who came expecting to see the Pope humiliated are now on their feet, applauding thunderously. Even some of Rossi's own colleagues, scientists who had watched him demolish religious figures for years, are clapping for the man who just intellectually dismantled their champion. Professor Rossi stands there, his face pale, his mouth slightly open, watching his own students abandon him for the wisdom he had spent decades trying to destroy. The cameras capture every moment of his public defeat. The intellectual giant brought low not by another academic, but by a humble servant whose only weapon was truth spoken with love. The moderator tries to restore order, but the applause continues. Students are talking excitedly among themselves, their entire worldview shifted by what they've just witnessed. Faculty members who entered as skeptics are now looking at Pope Leo XIV with something approaching awe. Rossi, the man who had destroyed bishops and made archbishops look foolish, has been systematically dismantled by someone who never raised his voice, never showed anger, never resorted to personal attacks. The priest destroyer has been destroyed with kindness, defeated by a depth of wisdom his brilliant mind simply couldn't comprehend. As the applause finally dies down, something unexpected happens. Professor Rossi, his academic arrogance completely shattered, slowly walks toward the Pope. The auditorium falls silent as Professor Rossi approaches Pope Leo XIV. Gone is the confident swagger, the intellectual superiority, the mocking smile. His shoulders are slumped, his face drawn. This is a man who has just watched everything he believed about himself crumble in front of 500 witnesses. He stops a few feet from the Pope, struggling to find words. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. Your Holiness, your arguments, I ... He pauses, looking down at his hands. I need to reconsider my certainty. It's a stunning admission from a man who built his entire career on absolute conviction that religion was humanity's greatest enemy. Pope Leo XIV doesn't gloat. There's no trace of triumph on his face, no hint of, I told you so. Instead, he steps forward and gently places his hand on Rossi's shoulder, the same gesture of compassion he might offer any soul in need. Valerio, he says softly, using the professor's first name, certainty is the prison of the mind. Questions are the key. May God bless your questions. The simple act of mercy breaks something in Rossi. The man who had spent his life attacking faith finds himself face to face with its truest expression. Not rules or dogma, but pure, unconditional love. As the crowd slowly files out, buzzing with excitement about what they've witnessed, Professor Rossi remains standing there, staring at the Pope who chose compassion over conquest. The debate is over, but for Valerio Rossi, the real journey is just beginning. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won by defeating our enemies, but by turning them into friends. And sometimes the most powerful argument for faith isn't an argument at all. It's simply love in action. And if you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. God bless you, and God bless America.